With exactly 6 months to go until the 2024 presidential election, Donald Trump continues to maintain a solid and consistent lead over Joe Biden in both the national popular vote and in the electoral college. And in this video, I'm going to show you guys my updated 2024 presidential election map prediction for the month of May. We will begin by filling in the solid states for both candidates. These are states that are virtually guaranteed to go to either Biden or Trump, and either candidate is going to win these states by margins of 12 percentage points or more. And as the election continues to near, Biden's list of solid states continues to dwindle. He only has California left on the West Coast. New polling from Washington shows that Trump is going to perform significantly better than he did in the last election. However, Biden will also do well enough in Hawaii to make it solid, and he's expected to win the 1st District of Maine, as well as the states of Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, his home state of Delaware, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. And with all of Biden's solid states combined, he has 100 electoral votes. For President Trump, he is going to easily win nearly every single state in the middle of the country. These were all solid states in both 2016 and 2020, and undoubtedly will be solid once again in 2024. However, Trump will also win the states of Texas, Iowa, and Ohio by solid margins, along with the 2nd District of Maine. Iowa and Ohio, Trump has performed very well in both of these states in the last 2 elections, winning them by 8 to 9 percentage points, and in 2024, he will be able to win them by 12. And Trump is also doing very well in Texas. He won it by 9 points in 2016. He can certainly win it by 12 against a very unpopular Joe Biden in 2024. And this will give Donald Trump 189 electoral votes. With these solid states filled in for both candidates, Trump already has an 89 electoral vote edge over the incumbent president. Now we're going to move on to taking a look at the likely states. These states are still very favored to go in one direction, and they will vote for either Biden or Trump by margins of 5 to 12 percentage points. So starting off with the likely Democratic states, because as you can see here, Biden obviously needs a little bit of a boost, we will still give him the states of Washington and Oregon. They're not going to be as solid as they were last time, but they are still very likely to remain Democratic states. In Washington, the latest polling really is not encouraging for the Biden campaign at all. According to the latest Independent Center poll, Trump leads Biden by 1%, and if you factor in RFK Jr., Trump is actually ahead by 5%. And this really shows you the impact of Kennedy, as well as the fact that Biden simply is not performing nearly as well as he did in the last election. Washington was a state he won by nearly 20 points. If you look at the polling before this, Biden is still relatively on top, so Washington is still going to be a blue state, just not as much as it was in the last election. Down in Oregon, we see a similar trend. Biden isn't really polling near the 16-17 point margin he won the state by in 2020. And if we look at the 2022 gubernatorial election in the state, this is for the governorship, Tina Kotek, the Democrat, only won this election by 3%. Oregon is not as blue as many people may think, and that is why it is only going to be likely for Joe Biden this November. Before we continue, only 13% of you guys are subscribed, so make sure you subscribe right now for consistent political content leading up to the 2024 election. Moving on to the Rocky Mountains, we have the state of Colorado. This was a solid state back in 2020. Joe Biden actually did quite well here, winning the state by 13.5 percentage points. But going into this November, he's performing significantly worse. According to Real Politics' polling average, Biden leads by just 6.5 percentage points. He's still probably going to do better than Clinton did in 2016, but it's definitely not where he wants to be. And so as a result, the state of Colorado is only going to be likely Democratic. Illinois will be likely as well. The margin's going to be just under 12 percentage points. It's still a pretty blue state, just not over that threshold. And on the East Coast, we have the state of New York. This is probably the biggest surprise we've seen over the last few years. New York really is nowhere near where it was just a few election cycles ago. I mean, look at the results from 2020 and 2016. Biden won by 23 points. In 2016, he won by 21. But according to the latest polling from the Empire State, Biden is barely ahead by even 10 percentage points. A lot of this has to do with the resignation of Andrew Cuomo and his sexual harassment scandal. And then Kathy Hochul isn't a popular governor either. And in New York City, we have Eric Adams, who isn't performing well either. So in New York, really, all the top Democratic leaders have underperformed, and that is why Democrats are doing so poorly in the state. And this has, in a way, rubbed off onto New Jersey as well. And on top of that, we, of course, have Senator Bob Menendez, who has been charged multiple times for bribery, and that's really hurting Democrats as well. According to the only poll that we have from New Jersey, Biden is only ahead by 7 percentage points in a state he won by 19. Big shifts like this really can happen. As we saw in 2016, the margin went from 12.8 for Clinton to 19.5 for Biden. And in 2024, that margin is going to go back down to somewhere around 10 percentage points, which is why New Jersey will be likely Democratic as well. For Trump, on the other hand, we only have 2 likely states, and this is mainly because Trump is going to do so well in states like Iowa, Ohio, and Texas that were likely states in past cycles, but in 2024, they're simply not going to be even remotely competitive, which is why for the former president, we only have 2 likely states on this map. The first one is a little bit obvious. We have Florida. Florida is no longer competitive. If we look at the Senate election from 2022, Marco Rubio defeated Val Demings by 16%. In the governor election in Florida on that same day, we had Ron DeSantis defeating Charlie Crist by a margin of 20 points. So Florida is not even going to remotely be competitive. Trump won by 3.4% in 2020. This margin has only grown in the last 4 years. According to polling from the Sunshine State, Trump is expected to win by 9 percentage points. I mean, this really is a very significant margin, considering the fact that the last time Florida was this solid for one candidate, you'd have to go all the way back to 1988 with the election of George H.W. Bush. So Florida is no longer a battleground state. It's not even listed as one of the battlegrounds on Real Clear Politics, and there really hasn't been too much polling from a state like Florida. If you went back to 2020, I mean, Florida was one of the most polled states in the entire country. That simply isn't the case anymore. So Florida is undoubtedly going to go to Donald Trump, and so will the state of North Carolina, where Trump leads by 5.4% in the polling average. He's doing even better if you factor in RFK Jr., and this really isn't a state that's going to be too competitive this cycle. Many people thought Biden was going to win it in 2020. He eventually lost it by a little over a percentage point, and with him significantly less popular, Biden really has no chance at flipping the Tar Heel state, a state that Trump has consistently been leading in throughout the entirety of the 2024 election cycle. And so as a result, we're going to place North Carolina into the likely Republican column as well. And so with 112 electoral votes left on this map, these are going to be the states that will decide the election. A little bit different from 2020. States like New Mexico, Virginia, even New Hampshire and Minnesota, these states weren't supposed to be close in the last election, but now they are going to be the center of our attention. Starting off with New Mexico, as Democrats continue to perform worse and worse with Hispanic voters, New Mexico, as the only state with a Hispanic majority in terms of population, the state continues to shift right, and according to the latest polling, Joe Biden really isn't doing all that well in the state, and Colorado is almost guaranteed to be more blue than New Mexico. That's just how things have been over the last few election cycles, and so New Mexico will be placed into only the lean Democratic column. Biden is still favored, but it's not going to be as clear as it was in the last election, and lean states are states that will vote for either candidate by margins between 1 and 5%. We also have the state of Virginia. This state went to Biden by 10% in 2020, but looking at the latest polling, Biden leads by just 4.3 percentage points on average. The state is not as solid for Biden as it was last time. And just 1 year after the incumbent president was elected in 2021, we saw the election of a Republican governor, that being Glenn Youngkin, who defeated former Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe. So against a former governor, Republicans were able to win Virginia, and it honestly wasn't even that close. So looking at the presidential election, we can expect a pretty big fall for President Biden here this November. Biden will also win the state of New Hampshire. This state really is not going to go red. There's really no chance for Trump here, but it is going to be closer than it was in the last election. Biden won it by 7 points. That margin is probably going to fall to around 4 to 5 percentage points. And finally, we have the state of Maine. This is the at-large vote. We already saw that Trump is guaranteed to win the 2nd district, while Biden will be on top in the 1st. In the at-large vote, though, we've seen a pretty big shakeup. I mean, look at the 2 latest polling from the Pan-Atlantic Research and Digital Research. We see Trump ahead by 6% according to Pan-Atlantic, and according to Digital Research, we have Biden ahead by 1. I mean, this is a state that Biden won by nearly 10 points in the last election, but now it has gotten so much closer. And if you put RFK Jr., these are the new polls that he conducted across the entire country, Kennedy beats Biden by 18 points in a state that hasn't voted red for decades, while against Trump, Kennedy is only ahead by 6. So the state of Maine is still probably going to be blue, just not nearly by as large of a margin as we've seen in the last few cycles. Next up, we're going to take a look at the lean states for former President Trump. First, we have the 2nd district of Nebraska. We don't really have any data there, but it's probably going to flip back to Trump, who did win the region in 2016. Moving down to the Sun Belt, this is where most of the lean Republican states are going to be. First off, we have Nevada. This is a state that hasn't voted red since 2004, and it's a state that Trump lost in both 2016 and 2020. However, according to the latest polling from the Silver State, Trump is actually ahead by 4.5 percentage points. He is clearly over Biden and has been ahead since November of last year. Joe Biden can't even lead or even come close to leading in the polling average in a state that he won pretty easily in the last election. Nevada is on track to flipping red. If there's any state that Trump can win that he did not win in 2016 or 2020, it is the state of Nevada. Nevada is currently a lean Republican state. We also have the states of Arizona and Georgia. These were the 2 closest states in the 2020 election. Arizona voted for Biden by 0.31%, and Georgia, the margin was 0.24. However, fast forward to 2024, Trump leads by 5% in the polling average in Arizona. He does even better if you factor in RFK Jr., while in the Peach State, he's ahead by 3.8. This state easily reelected its Republican governor, Brian Kemp, in 2022. Georgia is still a red state. Yes, it can get competitive. That's when Democrats are popular, and in 2024, that simply isn't the case. So both Arizona and Georgia are going to be lean Republican. And so with those states filled in, we are now just left with the 4 upper Rust Belt states: Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. These 3 states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, decided the election in 2016, and they did so again in 2020. And in 2024, we're probably going to see the same thing happen. It is going to come down to these 3 states. As you can see here, no candidate is at 270 electoral votes, but if they can win the Rust Belt, they will win the election. Starting off with the state of Wisconsin, Donald Trump leads by 1.8 percentage points here. This was a state he lost by 0.63%. Out of these 4 states, Wisconsin is the most conservative. If you look at the margins in 2020, Wisconsin was the closest. Biden won Wisconsin by a smaller margin than its 3 neighbors. In 2016, Trump performed the best in Wisconsin, winning it by a larger margin than he won Michigan or Pennsylvania. Minnesota was very close, though, with Hillary Clinton only getting by with a 1.5% margin. And so Wisconsin is going to be the first state to be categorized here. It will be lean Republican. Donald Trump really is performing very well in this state. Polling leading up to the 2020 election showed that Biden was supposed to win by 7 points. That never happened. He only won by 0.63. So with Trump now actually ahead in the polling, we have him expected to win by a lean margin. Now, the 3 remaining states, these are all going to be tilt states decided by margins less than 1%. In Minnesota, we're going to give this to Joe Biden. He is still very slightly favored. This state has the longest Democratic voting streak. It hasn't voted Republican since 1972, but according to the latest polling, it is going to get close. Biden only leads by 2.3% in a state that he won by a margin 3 times this in the last election. Michigan and Pennsylvania are going to be close as well, with Trump leading by 1.2% in the Wolverine state. Typically, Michigan has been the most liberal out of the 3 states. However, Pennsylvania is pretty blue as well in general, but in 2024, we see Trump performing very well here. Trump has led throughout a majority of the election cycle, and so going into November, he will be the favored candidate in both the Keystone State, this is Joe Biden's birth state, and in Michigan. And so with these 2 states filled in, Donald Trump is on track to win 313 electoral votes, which means that by all accounts, he is expected to win the 2024 presidential election to Joe Biden, who will win less electoral votes than Hillary Clinton did in 2016 with just 225. And so this is my updated 2024 presidential election prediction for the month of May. Thank you guys so much for watching, and make sure you like it down below if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel for consistent political uploads leading up to November, and comment down below who you think is going to win the 2024 election.